Should you be an entrepreneur? We got some insights on some qualities that might make you an awesome entrepreneur and maybe some surprising things that you don't need to be a successful entrepreneur. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Micah.
And I'm Shannon.
And we are the coaches and co-founders at Shinebright Career Coaching. And we created this channel to share with you, our community, all things job search related, leveling up in your career, and how to get a job that you actually love. Today we're talking about entrepreneurship.
It's a tough word to say.
I know.
And even harder to spell.
And also not so easy to execute. That's what we're going to talk about today.
So as coaches, career coaches, we get asked all the time, and it comes up in our sessions with clients all the time, I think I might want to be an entrepreneur, but I feel really scared, or I don't know if I should, or, how to know if entrepreneurship is actually a viable path for who you are and something you should actually consider, or maybe not.
100%. And I think it's so ironic. People ask us all the time, how did you decide to be an entrepreneur? How did you and Shannon do it? And actually it was all happenstance, wasn't it?
We did not actually decide. We were accidental entrepreneurs. I don't think either of us had this in sight, but I think it's interesting. We were just looking at some of the qualities that they, say might be good for someone to have if, they're thinking about entrepreneurship. What was on that list that you saw, Micah, that you thought, oh, okay, like I do have some of those qualities?
I like to win.
So if you're someone who likes to win, entrepreneurship might be a good thing. For me, one of the things that came up was I don't like being told what to do, especially by people who know less than me. Mike and I both, worked in restaurants and while we were building our business, and I worked in this particular restaurant that was a training store, which what that meant is every time they were hiring new managers for their different restaurants, they would come to our store and they would, be jumping into managerial roles, and often they were like college graduates and really didn't know anything about management or even the restaurant in general. And oh boy, did I not like to be told what to do by these fresh-faced little people. So that was one clue.
That reminds me also of a job I had early on. One of the things that it said here about entrepreneurs is I get an adrenaline rush from selling things. And just looking back, one of the jobs I had in college was working at Victoria's Secrets, which is a lingerie store. And I was always the #1 selling bra specialist. And I loved it. And they had no idea why. Nobody else cared. I understood what I was selling, who I needed to sell it to, and I knocked it out of the park. So that was always there within me. And I still get that rush from selling Shinebright's products and from signing up our clients whom I know that I can help and that we can help. And, that adrenaline's backed up by a good product, of course. But I still love to sell it.
Another one that surprised me, that made me think like, oh, maybe I was actually supposed to be an entrepreneur is liking my autonomy, right? So someone who really values freedom. I really love the idea that I get to design my days, that no one else is telling me what I need to do or what I have to do. I really can, figure out what schedule works best for me, what days, I want to put where, how I want to get my work done, the timelines of how to execute things, the quality that I think is, so it's a lot of autonomy, it's a lot of freedom. There isn't anyone putting a lot of parameters, and I love that.
Do you know what that reminds me of?
What?
More early on jobs, but Shannon throughout her 20s did a lot of different things. She worked in finance. She also worked in higher education and coaching kids in college, and she was successful at everything. And I always was, we were old friends, right? Old college friends. I was always blown away at how successful she was and miserable. Yeah. Miserable. She moved to New York City, got a job. She was killing it. And she was like, I'm quitting in 6 months and going to Europe. And I was, what's with you? And that just as an indicator that you can be capable, you know, and you can also be climbing the corporate ladder. But if there are these little pieces or big pieces that you're just detesting in your day-to-day and they're showing up in each thing you try, then maybe that piece of autonomy and having your own agency over your day is also like you.
Anything else that you saw on that list?
Yeah, so one that I thought was interesting but not surprising is I can work my way out of difficult situations. And that's pretty much my middle name from the time I was 2 and could walk. So, you know, obviously that makes a lot of sense in alignment with being an entrepreneur and starting our own business. But the ability is kind of nice to think about and nurture. As you know, we built our business, we had a lot of difficult situations, and I think sometimes we were scared, but I like to jump into things blindly sometimes, and that was really helpful. So
yeah, I have a story about that. Not connected to entrepreneurship, but I think it's connected to that ability or that skill set. We went to Mammoth one time and we were coming home and something was happening with
it was a blizzard and they were snow chains.
And
we had to take them off.
And I was so like deer in the headlights. This one jumps out of the car in a blizzard, under the car, under the tires, figuring out how to take them off. And I'm just like, what just happened? And I think that same willingness to jump in head first and like, let's figure this out. How do we make this work? You know, let's tackle this head on shows up in how you approach, you know, running our business too.
I'd forgotten about that. I think I'm still cold. But yeah, no, that's true. And I think actually it's one of my favorite pieces about our business and our story and actually our struggle, right? Because it wasn't easy, but we have accomplished so much. And I kind of like those moments where we just had to dive in and solve problems.
Okay, one last thing that was surprising to see on that list of maybe if you have this quality, you would be a good entrepreneur is always looking for new ways of doing things or improving things. And I think, you know, I'm really motivated by like, ooh, how can we make this a little bit better? Or how can we adjust this a little bit or make it, you know, run a little bit more efficiently or, you know, look a certain way. Like I always love that idea of like polishing something or, you know, bringing something just a little bit better, and to have the freedom to do that, to be able to have the say to like, ooh, I think we can improve this or make this better, and always being motivated to do so happens to be a good quality for an entrepreneur.
Well, and it's actually something that we use day to day, and Shannon, you having that is a gift. And the first time I saw it actually was early on in Shinebright's days. We actually were doing a lot of work with young people about strengths and how to get to know themselves to find the right path in their life. And we wrote a curriculum so that we could teach this to kids. And it was so interesting to see Shannon's editing eye in writing. I mean, this was quite a document that we created. And we worked on it for an incredibly long time, and we sold it. And it was like our first big project. I remember we got paid $16,000 for that. Do you remember?
Ain't bad.
No, we were so excited. But again, that fine eye, that ability to stay the course, to make it polished and improved and even better, you use all the time. And it's taken us really, really far in our journey.
Yeah, so maybe not accidental entrepreneurs, you know, maybe there were, you know, maybe there's a little bit of destiny into this, and it just fate kind of intervened and, you know, got us on this course. So I think it's interesting to talk about what are some of the things that people assume you should have in place if you want to be an entrepreneur that actually might not be true. Did you have any thoughts on this, Micah?
Yeah, it is interesting because people ask us, like we said, all the time. And I think that people assume that entrepreneurs need to be dangerous people that are willing to just jump off cliffs and take chances and take risks. And what's really different about what the day-to-day is, or the people that you look at that have built successful companies, is, yeah, they had an idea, and they were ready to try it out, and they were methodical, and they stayed the course, and they put in day-to-day hard work. So it wasn't this dangerous leap. Maybe it was a leap of faith and a belief in themselves, but it wasn't irrational, and it wasn't something that just popped up and they did. Usually when I talk to entrepreneurs that are really successful, they've had a lot of ideas and they've tried a lot of things and they're really diligent.
Yeah, and I would say that that's been our path, right? You know, where we started was one, we weren't trying to build a business. We just had an idea that we were both inspired by and curious about, is this something that people would be interested in? Could this have an impact? Is there value here? And we kind of, you know, followed the breadcrumbs. We followed where energy was flowing. And guess what? Where we're at now is actually looks pretty different than where we started. There's some essence to the work and some qualities that are still in place, but the audience that we deliver it to, you know, the why has shifted over time. And so I think, you know, being able to put your head down and really focus and stay committed to the path is a little bit different than maybe what people assume about entrepreneurs, I guess.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of weight behind what goes into finding success as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur who's creating a product or something like that. And I think that agility is a big piece of what's helped us to be successful. Yes, we had the belief to follow the energy, pick up the breadcrumbs, but we also were agile and willing to shift. And that was because we were learning as we were going and building upon that knowledge. And that's actually the biggest part of being an entrepreneur, is being willing to learn and build upon and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and that's a framing, right? Because I think, you know, people could look at our path and say like, wow, there's a lot of failures, right? Or you could frame it as Micah just did. Wow, there was a lot of opportunity to learn. Right? There was a lot of opportunity to kind of take like, this is working, this isn't working. How do we pivot? How do we, you know, go in this direction if this is no longer working? And, you know, sometimes maybe if you're someone who, you know, failure or the idea of, you know, the initial idea, you hold it so precious and it has to be this certain way, and things change or things shift or they don't turn out exactly how you imagine, and that shattering, that might be tricky as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do a lot of self-reflection and to think about where your intrinsic motivations come from, and also your ability to be self-reflective and accepting of your true identity. Because the folks who actually, you know, jump in and have a failure and they crack, it's because that role of being an entrepreneur was their identity. And that's actually 100% wrong, because their identity is who they are and it helps them to show up in their work, right? And so you got to dig in and understand who you are and why you even want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Back to that risk taking, right? This idea that if you want to go down the entrepreneurial path, that you have to be this big risk taker and, like Micah said, you know, want to jump off big cliffs and take big leaps. And I think, you know, what is interesting about this is that on the other side of that, what people are saying sometimes, or not saying, but actually feeling, is like, I want to actually go down the path that feels safe, right? That has maybe more stability. And there's this assumption that if you're an entrepreneur, it's very risky and there's, you know, all these leaps and things, there's no stability, there's no safety, and that if you go and work for someone else, that's safe, that's secure, you know, that's going to be consistent. And I think if we peel back the layers a little bit, you know, we're actually in a time right now where there's huge layoffs in tech and corporate America, right? So how safe actually is going and working for someone else when the security of your job is actually in someone else's hands? I always think about, you know, one example during the pandemic a few years ago. A lot of people's jobs were very uncertain. They felt really unsafe because, you know, someone else was determining whether they could go in the office or not, or how often. And Mike and I were in this very protected, very safe bubble where we got to really make decisions about, you know, how did we want to pivot? How did we want to respond? Did we feel safe being in our office? When did we feel ready to leave and go home? We're still in a position of being the one who's making choices about, do we want to stay home or do we want to go back in the office? And so, you know, I think I feel and have felt more safe being the one who's in charge of making those decisions. But I don't know if someone would ultimately, you know, feel that when they're thinking about entrepreneurship versus going and working, you know, for corporate America per se.
Yeah, I I think that we're in an interesting time in our culture and in the world, because for a long time there was safety, and you get a job and you stay there your whole life and you have benefits, you retire, and then you die. And that's changed. People are not staying at companies for their whole professional career. They're taking chances and they're changing jobs and things like that too. And sometimes I think that there has not been a catch-up of belief in get a job, work for someone else, be safe, create something for myself, create something that can be safe when I make it successful. And people get stuck there. So a lot of our clients are like, I kind of want to be an entrepreneur, but I really like my paycheck. They forget to think about, they could be let go immediately. Or, when the pandemic happened, right now it's the tech layoffs. When the pandemic happened, entertainment folks, we live in Los Angeles, it was terrifying for a lot of people. It stopped, right? So there's all these different layers of what is safety, and thinking about how much stability and safety you need is one thing to consider if you're going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I think also just reframing safety, because there's so many things that are out of your control when you go and work for someone else. Who your boss is, who your teammates are, the work that you're doing, how much you have to work, how much you're working for, what you get paid, what your value is. You're basically giving over all of that to someone else, right? Where as an entrepreneur, there are some variables, right? In terms of how much you maybe are selling one month over the other, but who you work with, what you're selling, the quality of the product, how much you work, what you're charging for your services, you're deciding. Mm-hmm. Right? And so to me, when I hear those two laid out like that, it actually feels safer or more stable for me to be in charge of that, to know Micah and I are making those decisions versus outsourcing that to someone else. So I think this is, how do you define safety? How do you define security? Right? And listen, at the end of the day, if you're someone who's like, for me, the most important thing is I get that weekly paycheck and I know exactly how much it is, and if that is the most important thing to you, then maybe being an entrepreneur is not a good fit, and that's okay, right? And to know that. But if for you, you're craving maybe more autonomy, more freedom, more ability to make decisions of your time or how much you could possibly make, or you really like to jump in and solve and you don't want to get slowed down by, too many, rules or processes, maybe safety and stability in terms of how you were thinking about it is not as important to you as maybe you thought.
I mean, these are all really good questions to ask before you dive in, because listen, your career, your job, how you support yourself is, how you're going to live your life. And it is so imperative, we believe, and what we see in our work, to choose something that aligns with who you are, that engages you daily. Those are the things that actually keep us mentally happy and healthy. And being an entrepreneur can be a really exciting ride. And for the right people, that alignment is imperative. They have to have that ability to carve out their own future. And so we hope that you have enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully it's elicited some questions to ask yourself, and maybe it's confirmed some things, right?
Maybe you thought, hey, actually I can align with some of those things you said. Maybe I should be considering this.
Yeah. And if you like this video, please tune in for more. We're always trying to create the best content for you. If you have stories of your own entrepreneurship at that time, please leave them in the comments and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you as a part of our community.
Thanks so much. Take care.